The morning sun bathed the campus in a golden light, but all I could feel was the cold weight of silence around me. I stood in my military uniform, perfectly pressed, the insignia on my chest gleaming with hard-earned pride. Around me, my classmates laughed, hugged, and tossed their caps into the air, their voices blending into a jubilant chorus of celebration. But I was alone, detached from the crowd, separated by more than just a few feet. In the audience, I saw them, my family. Their faces were clear as day, but their expressions were anything but warm. I caught the sneers, the sideways glances, the barely concealed smirks. My mother whispered something sharply to my father, who shook his head with a mix of disappointment and disbelief. My siblings exchanged glances that said everything without words. She failed. She's not like us. They didn't understand. How could they? I had skipped this ceremony, my own graduation day. To them, that was the ultimate failure, the proof I wasn't good enough. The confirmation that I was the black sheep, the disappointment in a lineage of achievers. My sister had just landed a prestigious job in the city. My brother was already climbing the ranks at the firm. But me? I chose a different path, one they couldn't see, one they refused to understand. I felt the sting of their judgment like 1,000 tiny cuts, each one a reminder that I was alone in this moment. They whispered, "She's wasting her time. She's never gonna make it. Look at her. No cap toss, no smiles. Just standing there like she's already defeated." But what they didn't see was the battle beneath the surface. The long nights in the barracks, the endless drills, the sacrifices I made to get here. The moments when I wanted to quit but pushed through anyway. The times I chose duty over celebration, hard work over easy approval. I wasn't there for applause. I was there for something far bigger, something that didn't fit into their narrow expectations. I may have skipped my graduation, I thought, but I have not skipped my destiny. That flicker of determination sparked bright inside me, burning away the doubt and the pain. I straightened my shoulders, lifted my chin, and breathed in deeply. This moment wasn't about their approval. It was about the promise I made to myself. To prove that success isn't always about the spotlight. Sometimes it's about the quiet victories no one sees. They called me a failure, but I was far from it. I was preparing for a different kind of battlefield, one where lives depended on swift decisions and steady hands, where courage wasn't measured by applause, but by action. As the ceremony went on, I stayed in the shadows, watching my peers take their bows. Their joy was genuine, and I didn't resent it, because I knew my own victory was coming, one they would never expect. Before we jump back in, tell me, where are you tuning in from? If this story touches something deep inside you, make sure you're subscribed. Tomorrow, I've saved something extra special just for you, because sometimes the hardest battles lead to the greatest triumphs. A chance encounter. She sat alone in the hospital's trauma unit, the sterile scent mixing with the faint hum of machines and distant voices. The weight of the day pressed down on her, the disappointment of skipping her own graduation still raw. Her family's words echoed in her mind. You failed. You didn't deserve that cap and gown. But here she was, in her military uniform, volunteering where lives were saved, hoping to find a new purpose. The chaos around her was oddly comforting. Amid the flurry of nurses and doctors, she moved quietly, observing. It was then that a voice stopped her. "You've got that look," the surgeon said, stepping beside her. The woman was seasoned, lines of experience etched into her face, eyes sharp yet kind, like someone carrying a storm inside. She turned, startled. "I guess I am." The surgeon smiled gently. "I'm Dr. Reynolds. Been in trauma for over 20 years. Seen a lot of storms. Some that nearly broke me, others that made me stronger." There was a pause, filled only by the steady beep of a monitor nearby. "Why are you here?" Dr. Reynolds asked. She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I missed my graduation. My family thinks I failed. I'm not sure where I belong anymore." Dr. Reynolds nodded, knowingly. "I remember feeling that way once. I wanted to quit before I even started. My own family doubted me, said I'd never cut it in this world. But I found something here, something that changed everything." "What was it?" she asked, leaning in, hope flickering. "The realization that leadership isn't about perfection," Dr. Reynolds said. It's about heart, about showing up when it matters most, even when you're scared, even when everyone else has counted you out. Her eyes searched the surgeon's face, seeing a mirror of her own struggles, defiance, pain, and a fierce determination. You have the heart of a leader, Dr. Reynolds continued. You just need to believe in yourself. That's what got me through my darkest days. That's what will carry you through yours. The words settled over her like a balm. For the first time that day, the weight felt lighter. Dr. Reynolds placed a hand on her shoulder. Come with me. Watch, learn. You might find your path here. She followed, heart pounding, as Dr. Reynolds moved with calm authority. In the trauma unit, lives hung in the balance, and every second counted. See that? Dr. Reynolds gestured toward a patient being stabilized. This is where courage meets skill, where leadership isn't given, it's earned. The young woman nodded, absorbing every moment, every lesson. Later, as the shift wound down, Dr. Reynolds turned to her again. You're stronger than you think, and this is only the beginning. Walking out of the hospital, the night air felt different. The sting of yesterday's rejection was still there, but now it was mingled with something new. Purpose. A fire fueled not by the approval of others, but by a belief in herself. She touched the insignia on her uniform and whispered, I'm ready. Facing the past. She stood at the edge of the room, dressed in her crisp military uniform, sharp and unyielding like the path she had carved for herself. The faces around her were familiar, family members who once dismissed her with cruel words and cold shoulders. Tonight was the night she would face them, not with anger, but with the truth she had lived. I know why you're here, she began, voice steady but filled with a quiet fire. You think I failed, that I gave up, that skipping my graduation was proof I wasn't good enough. She let the weight of those words hang in the air, watching their eyes flicker with discomfort. But you were wrong. All along. A cousin scoffed from the back. You never walked across that stage. You never earned your place. Her jaw tightened. No, I didn't walk across that stage. But I walked into operating rooms. Into battlefields. Into situations where lives depended on me being ready. She took a breath, steadying herself. I may have missed your ceremony, but I have been walking my own path. One you refuse to see. Her mother shifted in her seat, eyes averted. We only wanted what was best for you. Best for me? Her voice rose, but never broke. Then why did you mock me when I was struggling? When I needed you the most? You said I was a failure. A disappointment. You didn't see the nights I spent studying, the hours I spent training, the sacrifices I made. The room grew tense. A silence thick with years of resentment and misunderstanding. I joined the military because I wanted to make a difference, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Because I believed in something bigger than myself. And yes, it was hard. I lost people I loved. I stood alone in moments you thought I would break. She paused, the memory of her husband's funeral flashing in her mind. The cruel whispers, the sideways glances. How they mocked her then, questioning her strength, her worth. But the moment the soldiers saluted her, that was when everything changed. They called me Colonel, she said softly, and they said, we're ready. Ready to follow me, not because of a piece of paper, but because I earned their respect. Because I proved that leadership isn't just about rank, it's about heart, courage, and unwavering commitment. A silence fell. Then a voice, hesitant and low. But how did you get here, after all we said? She met that gaze head on. I got here by refusing to let your words define me. By working harder when you doubted me. By turning every insult into fuel. You said I failed. I say I found my purpose. Her uncle shifted uncomfortably. We never meant to push you away. She shook her head. Intentions don't erase the pain. But tonight isn't about blame. It's about truth. I'm not the girl who skipped her graduation. I'm the woman who became chief of trauma, who saves lives on the front lines, who leads soldiers in the darkest hours. Her voice softened, but the fire remained. I don't need your approval anymore. I need your understanding that success isn't always a ceremony or applause. Sometimes, It's the quiet victories no one sees. Her father's eyes glistened with something she hadn't seen in years. Regret. I may not have walked across your stage, she said, but I am walking my path, and I am proud of where it has taken me. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the family who once mocked her. You can choose to believe in me now, or not. But know this. I am not the failure you imagined. I am the woman who stood tall when it mattered most. A pause. Then, a slow nod from her sister. I'm proud of you, her sister whispered. The tension began to dissolve, replaced by a fragile hope. Tonight wasn't just a confrontation. It was a transformation. From the doubted girl to the determined woman, from the shadow of their judgment to the light of her own truth. She had faced the past, and in doing so, she had finally stepped fully into her future. The surgeon's challenge. The first day under the trauma surgeon's watch felt like stepping into a storm. The weight of the military uniform pressed against her skin, a daily reminder of the path she had chosen, and the expectations she had yet to meet. Every step in those sterile halls echoed with the voices of doubt she'd carried for years. Her family's words still lingered, sharp and unforgiving. You failed. You didn't even graduate with your class. But here, in this crucible of life and death, she was no longer defined by their disbelief. The surgeon's voice cut through the noise on that first morning. This isn't a place for hesitation, he said, his eyes steady and unflinching. You'll be responsible for saving lives when every second counts. You need to be faster, stronger, sharper. The challenge was clear. The demands were brutal. Her body ached from endless drills. Her mind spun from the weight of knowledge she had yet to master. There were moments when she doubted herself, moments when the exhaustion blurred the edges of her resolve. In the quiet of the night, she questioned if she was strong enough to carry the burden. The trauma surgeon's words echoed in her mind, reminding her that every failure she'd endured was a step toward this moment. Remember why you started. Remember who you're doing this for. The memory of her family's cold dismissal fueled her determination. When they said she had failed, when they refused to attend her graduation, she had felt invisible, like nothing she did would ever be enough. But here, beneath the harsh lights of the trauma bay, she was being forged into something new. Each challenge, each grueling test, chipped away the doubts and hardened her spirit. The surgeon became more than a mentor. He was a guide through the storm. He pushed her beyond what she thought were her limits. Compassion is as vital as skill, he reminded her one afternoon after a long shift. You'll save lives not just with your hands, but with your heart. Never lose sight of that. Those words settled deep inside her, anchoring her during the most harrowing hours. Her growth was not just in her hands or her mind, but in her very presence. She learned to carry herself with a quiet strength, a calm that could steady the panic in any trauma room. The uniform she wore no longer felt like a symbol of judgment, but a badge of honor earned through sweat and sacrifice. As days turned into weeks, the trauma surgeon's respect became evident. He began entrusting her with more responsibility, watching as she made swift decisions under pressure. You're ready, he said one morning, voice low but certain. You're more ready than you realize. That affirmation was more powerful than any accolade. It was a stark contrast to the voices from her past that had tried to define her limits. Here, in this high-stakes world, she was proving not just to others, but to herself, that she was capable. The day she was named Chief of Trauma was the moment all the pain and struggle converged into triumph. The surgeon's announcement was simple but monumental. She's Chief of Trauma. The words resonated beyond the walls of the hospital. They were a declaration that she had risen above the shadows of failure and mockery. Her family's disbelief was palpable when they heard the news. The same people who once said she'd never make it now had to confront the reality of her success. But it wasn't their approval she sought anymore. It was the respect earned in the chaos of the trauma bay, in the lives saved, in the unwavering commitment she had forged through adversity. Even at her husband's funeral, where whispers and skeptical glances followed her steps, she stood firm. The soldiers who had served alongside him, once distant and guarded, now stood with her. When they saluted and said, "Colonel, we're ready," it was a moment of profound recognition of her strength, her leadership, and her unyielding spirit. Her journey had been a battlefield of its own. The scars left by family rejection and personal loss could have broken her. Instead, they became the foundation of her resilience. The surgeon's challenge had been more than a test of skill, it was a test of character. And she had passed with honor. Now, as chief of trauma, she carried the weight of lives in her hands every day. The memory of those who doubted her was no longer a chain but a fuel. Every patient she saved, every life she touched, was a quiet victory over the past. Her story was no longer about failure or mockery. It was about rising. Rising above the pain, above the judgment, and above the silence that once threatened to consume her. In the trauma bay, beneath the harsh lights and relentless pressure, she found her truth. She was not defined by what others said she couldn't do. She was defined by what she could do, and what she would do. For herself, for her husband, for the soldiers who stood ready beside her, and for every life she fought to save. The surgeon's challenge had been fierce, but it had forged a leader, a chief, a colonel, a woman who refused to be broken. And now, when the soldiers salute and say, "Colonel, we're ready," she knows she has earned every bit of that respect. Because she fought through every doubt, every struggle, and every loss, and emerged not just as a survivor, but as a force of healing and hope. Trials and triumphs. The moment I stepped into the emergency room, my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. The sterile scent of antiseptic, the sharp beeping of monitors, the hurried voices, it all hit me at once. This was no longer a classroom or a simulation. This was real. This was life and death. And I was right in the middle of it. I was 25, dressed in my military uniform, the weight of my insignia pressing down on my shoulders. Not just a cadet anymore, but someone expected to act, to decide, to save lives. My hands trembled slightly as I scrubbed in, the adrenaline flooding through me like a river breaking its dam. The case came fast. A young soldier, critical trauma, bleeding out before our eyes. The surgeons barked commands. There was no room for hesitation. I focused on every instruction, every movement. I held clamps, passed instruments, monitored vitals. The chaos felt like a storm, but inside me, I found a strange calm. When the surgeon looked at me during the procedure, his eyes locked with mine. After hours that blurred into a frantic dance, the operation was a success. The soldier's life was saved. In that moment, I was no longer just a trainee. I was a medical professional, a part of something greater. Later, as the room quieted, the lead surgeon approached me. His voice was steady, carrying a weight that settled deep in my soul. "You have the heart of a true surgeon," he said. Those words were more than praise. They were a declaration, a turning point. I thought back to my family, the ones who said I had failed, who refused to come to my graduation, who whispered that I'd never make it. They didn't see this moment. They didn't see the late nights, the endless studying, the sacrifices I made. They didn't see the tears shed alone or the way I kept moving forward when the world told me to stop. It wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving to myself that I belonged here, that I was worthy, that I could be more than the sum of their doubts. The victory was bittersweet. I remembered my husband's funeral, the jeers, the mocking voices that tried to break me. But even then, something inside refused to shatter. The soldiers who stood with me that day, those who had witnessed my pain and my strength, saluted me with respect. "Colonel, we're ready," they said. In that moment, I wasn't just a widow or a woman who had lost everything. I was a leader. I realized leadership wasn't about titles or medals. It was about showing up when it mattered most. It was about standing tall when others wanted to see you fall. It was about carrying the weight of your past without letting it crush you. That first trauma case wasn't just a professional milestone. It was a personal revolution. It marked the end of my apprenticeship and the beginning of my command. Every stitch I helped place, every breath I helped save, stitched together a new identity. One forged in fire and tempered by loss. As I looked around the emergency room that day, I saw the faces of those who doubted me fade away. What remained was the hard-earned respect of my peers, the trust of my mentors, the silent acknowledgement that I was no longer a girl who skipped her graduation. I was the woman who earned the right to wear that uniform with honor. And with that right came responsibility. Responsibility to lead, to inspire, to heal, to become the chief of trauma. The journey ahead was still uncertain. The battles both inside and outside the operating room would continue. But I had tasted victory. I had felt the rush of purpose. And I carried with me the surgeon's words like a shield. You have the heart of a true surgeon. No longer just surviving. I was ready to lead, to serve, to transform pain into strength, to prove that even when family says you failed, and when grief tries to silence you, your spirit can rise, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. This was my story, my trial, my triumph. And I was only just beginning. Heartbreak at the funeral. The air was thick with sorrow, the kind that presses down on your chest and blurs your vision. I stood there, in my military uniform, the crisp fabric, a sharp contrast to the soft, aching grief around me. The funeral was crowded, faces solemn, eyes red-rimmed. Yet beneath that quiet mourning, I could hear it, the faint, bitter whispers from some of my own family. They didn't want me there. Some believed I was unworthy of this grief, that I had no right to mourn the man who had been my husband. Their voices were low, sharp with judgment. She failed. She never graduated. She's nothing like what we expected. Those words stung more than the loss itself, cutting through the silence like a cold wind. I felt the weight of their disdain settle on me, heavier than any uniform or medal. For years they had written me off. They had watched me stumble, skipped my graduation day, and whispered that I would never rise. But here I was, bearing the loss of the man I loved, standing tall among those who truly knew me. The room seemed to shrink around me, the walls closing in with every cruel glance. But something inside me stirred. A quiet strength, born from battles fought far beyond these walls. I was not the girl they thought I was. I was not a failure. I was a soldier, a leader, a survivor. When it was my turn to speak, the murmurs paused. All eyes found me, some curious, some skeptical. I took a breath, steadying the tremble in my hands, and I spoke. He believed in me when no one else did. My voice was steady, firm. The room fell into a hush, the words hanging heavy between us. I spoke of the man who had stood by me through every doubt, every dark night, the man who had seen beyond the mistakes, beyond the whispers, and had chosen to love me anyway. He saw my worth when my family could not. He saw the soldier beneath the doubts, the strength beneath the scars. I told them about the battles I fought, not just on the battlefield, but within myself. How I had been told I would never make it, never lead. How I had risen anyway, through sweat, through pain, through relentless will. And how, step by step, I had earned the respect of those who mattered most, my fellow soldiers, my mentors, my husband. This uniform, I said, touching the insignia on my chest, is not just fabric and metals. It is a testament to resilience, to courage, to the promise I made to never give up. Some faces softened, others remained hard, but none could deny the truth in my words. I was no longer the girl they dismissed. I was the colonel they saluted. As I finished, a quiet murmur rose from the soldiers gathered behind me. One by one, they stepped forward, standing at attention. Their eyes were clear, their faces proud. "Colonel, we're ready." The words echoed through the room, a powerful tribute that silenced even the harshest critics. It was a moment of redemption, not just for me, but for the man we had lost, and for the family of soldiers who stood united in grief and honor. In that room filled with sorrow and whispered judgment, I found my voice. I reclaimed my place, not just as a widow, but as a leader. As a woman who had been told she failed, but had risen to become the chief of trauma. As a soldier who bore her scars with pride, and whose strength could not be denied. They said I failed. They said I wasn't worthy. But standing there, beneath the weight of loss and the gaze of those who doubted me, I knew the truth. I was not just surviving, I was leading, I was rising, and I was ready to face whatever came next. Because he believed in me when no one else did, and that belief had made all the difference. The funeral ended, but the silence lingered, a silence now filled with respect. The soldier's salute was a promise, a bond that no whisper could break. "Colonel, we're ready." And with those words I stepped forward, carrying the love I lost and the strength I gained into the future, unbroken and unbowed. The salute of honor. The funeral had just ended. The air was thick with grief, heavy with the weight of loss. She stood alone, shoulders squared in her crisp military uniform, the insignia of a 25-year-old woman who had fought battles no one outside the service could understand. The murmurs of the mourners still echoed faintly in the distance, but her focus was elsewhere, on the cold sting of their whispered judgments. Her family had said she failed, they said she was a disgrace. They reminded her she skipped her graduation, that she wasn't the perfect daughter they had hoped for. Even now, at the funeral of her husband, the man she loved and lost in service, their voices mocked her quietly. They didn't see her sacrifices. They didn't see the battles fought in hospitals, on battlefields, inside her own heart. But then, something unexpected happened. A group of soldiers appeared, stepping forward in perfect formation. Their faces were solemn, their posture rigid with respect. They were not just any soldiers. These were men and women who had served under her command, who had seen her lead through chaos and pain. They stood tall before her, their hands rising in unison to their foreheads in a salute. One of them stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. "Colonel, we're ready." The words struck her like thunder. Colonel! That title. It wasn't just a rank. It was a testament. A symbol of every late night, every grueling surgery, every moment she had pushed herself beyond exhaustion. It was the recognition she had long been denied. The acknowledgement she had craved not from family, but from those who knew her true worth. In that instant, the world shifted. The weight of doubt and shame that had clung to her began to slip away. She felt a surge of pride swell inside her chest. This salute was more than military protocol. It was a declaration. She was a leader, a healer, a warrior, a survivor. She remembered the words of the surgeon who had once looked at her with quiet admiration and said, "She's chief of trauma." At the time, it had seemed like a distant dream, a whispered hope. But now it was real. Not just a title, but a reality forged by blood, sweat, and unyielding determination. The soldier's salute was a bridge to that reality. It connected the girl who was told she failed with the woman who had risen, time and again, to prove them wrong. It was a moment of transformation, a powerful, undeniable acknowledgement of her achievements and sacrifices. As the soldiers held their salute, their eyes locked with hers, she saw the respect shining there. Not pity, not doubt, respect. And with it, a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. "Colonel," the soldier repeated, voice filled with quiet strength, "we stand with you. We're ready to follow your command." Her lips parted, but no words came. She didn't need to speak. The salute said it all. It said she was no longer the girl who skipped graduation, no longer the woman mocked at a funeral. She was someone who had earned her place, through pain, through perseverance, through unwavering dedication. The soldiers turned, their formation steady as they prepared to march on, but she remained rooted, absorbing every moment, every gesture. The salute was a victory. A promise. A new beginning. For the first time in a long time, she felt whole. She raised her hand, returning the salute with pride and honor. The connection was electric, a silent vow between leader and troops. They weren't just ready to serve. They were ready to fight beside her, to trust her with their lives. And she was ready to lead. In that salute, everything changed. The past's harsh judgments faded, replaced by a future forged in honor and respect. The family's doubts and dismissals no longer defined her. The soldier's salute had rewritten her story. She was not a failure. She was a colonel. She was a chief of trauma. She was the leader they needed. And for the first time, she believed it too. The sound of boots on gravel echoed as the soldiers moved away, leaving her standing strong, a beacon of resilience. The world might still whisper, might still doubt, but here, in this moment, she was recognized as she truly was. A warrior who had fought through every trial. A leader who had earned her place. A hero who commanded respect. The salute of honor had arrived. And with it, a new chapter began. The road to Chief of Trauma. They said I failed, that I wasn't good enough, that I had no place wearing that uniform. My family didn't just doubt me. They told me I'd never make it. They even said I wasn't worthy of walking across that stage at graduation. So I didn't. I skipped it. I swallowed the shame and the silence that followed. But this story isn't about how I fell. It's about how I rose. After that day, I buried myself in my work. Every shift, every long night in the trauma bay, I showed up. Not just as a soldier or a medic, but as someone determined to prove that failure was just a word, not a destiny. There were moments when the weight nearly crushed me, when self-doubt crept in like a shadow. I remembered their words, "You'll never be good enough." But then I thought of my patients, the ones who needed someone to fight for them when their world was falling apart. That was when I found my fuel. I began leading my team through the toughest cases, multiple traumas, life or death decisions. The chaos of the emergency room became my battlefield, and I was determined to win. My peers started to notice. The junior doctors who once whispered doubts now came to me for guidance. Nurses who doubted my resolve now trusted my judgment. Slowly, respect replaced skepticism. One afternoon, a senior surgeon pulled me aside. He looked me in the eye and said, "You're ready. You're not just good. You're exceptional. You're going to be chief of trauma." His words felt like thunder. I had heard failed so often, but now I heard chief of trauma, a title I had only dreamed of. The path wasn't easy. Every promotion brought new challenges. There were whispers behind my back, harsh critiques that felt personal. Some questioned if I could lead a team under pressure. I remember one meeting where a colleague said, "Are you sure you're cut out for this? Trauma isn't for the faint-hearted." I didn't respond with anger. I responded with action. I studied harder. I trained longer. I became the first to arrive and the last to leave. I learned not only the medicine, but the leadership it demanded. I listened to my team, learned from their experiences, and earned their trust. And then, when I finally stepped into the role of chief of trauma, I understood what it meant to carry that responsibility. Every patient who came through our doors, I saw them as more than a case. They were people, warriors in their own right, fighting battles that didn't always make headlines. I fought for them. I fought for my team. I fought for the idea that no one should be counted out, not even me. But life's tests didn't stop at the hospital doors. The day my husband died was the darkest chapter yet. I remember walking into the funeral home, feeling the eyes of people who once respected me turn to whispers and smirks. They mocked me, the widow in uniform, standing strong amidst their doubts. "Is she really military? What's she doing here?" I heard. But then, something remarkable happened. One by one, soldiers began to stand. They straightened their backs and saluted. They looked at me, their colonel, and said with unwavering respect, "Colonel, we're ready." In that moment, the mocking stopped. The silence was filled with honor. They saw me not as a woman who lost her husband, but as a leader who stood tall, carrying the weight of duty and grief with equal grace. From that day, I realized the power of resilience, that no matter the scars, visible or hidden, we can rise above the judgments, the pain, and the doubts. I am chief of trauma. I lead with my heart and my hands. Every life I save is a victory over those who said I'd fail. Every soldier who salutes me is a testament to the strength forged in fire. My family said I failed. I skipped my graduation, but the surgeon said it best. She's chief of trauma. And when the soldiers stand at my husband's funeral and salute, saying, "Colonel, we're ready," they remind me that failure is never final. It's just the beginning of a battle worth fighting. This is my road, not easy, not straight, but mine, paved with resilience, commitment, and the unyielding belief that I could be more than their doubts. I am more. I am chief. A family reunited. The day she invited her family to the trauma unit was a quiet storm waiting to break. Years of silence, sharp words and cold shoulders hung heavily in the air as they followed her through the halls. Her uniform was crisp, the medals and insignias gleaming, a stark contrast to the doubts reflected in their eyes. They had once said she failed. They said she never graduated. They said she was nothing but a disappointment. Now, here she was, the first female chief of trauma in her unit's history, commanding respect not by birthright, but by sheer will and undeniable skill. She led them through the entrance, past the reception desk, where nurses and medics glanced up briefly but nodded with recognition. This was her world now, a world where lives were saved in the blink of an eye, where every decision carried weight heavier than words. "Look," she said softly, gesturing to a team gathered around an emergency patient. "This is where it all happens. These are the moments that define us. No room for failure here." Her family's faces were tight, some still skeptical, others quietly curious. They watched as she gave orders with calm authority, her voice steady, her eyes sharp. The team moved like a well-oiled machine under her command. Each member respected her, trusting her judgment implicitly. She took them to the trauma bay, where a soldier with a critical injury was being stabilized. "This is Specialist Ramirez," she explained. "Arrived with severe trauma from an IED blast. We're fighting to save his life." Her brother shifted uneasily. He had mocked her for skipping graduation, calling her a quitter. But now, he saw a woman who carried the weight of life and death on her shoulders without hesitation. "Every second counts," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "Every decision can mean the difference between life and death." Her mother's eyes softened. The years of harsh words seemed to melt away just a little. She introduced her team one by one, each soldier and medic standing a little taller as she spoke of their skills and dedication. "This is Sergeant Ellis, the best trauma nurse I've ever worked with, and Captain Monroe, our lead anesthesiologist. Without them, none of this would be possible." Her father's jaw clenched. He had always doubted her. But hearing her speak with such pride and confidence, seeing the respect she commanded, was something he hadn't expected. They moved on to the simulation room. "We train relentlessly," she said, "because when it's real, there's no second chance." She watched her family's eyes widen as they saw the drills, the precision, the urgency. The discipline she had honed over years in the military was not just about following orders. It was about saving lives. In the quiet moments between tours, she caught her mother's gaze. There was a question there, unspoken but clear. "How did you get here?" She answered without words, letting her uniform, her rank, her team, and the lives she saved speak for her. Then, the moment she had both dreaded and hoped for, the soldiers saluting her as she entered the trauma unit. The same soldiers who had stood solemnly at her husband's funeral, mocking her grief until they saw her strength. Now they called her Colonel, their voices steady and full of respect. "Colonel, we're ready," one said, standing at attention. Her family heard it too. The weight of that salute was heavier than any accusation they had ever thrown at her. It was a salute not just to her rank, but to her resilience, her courage, her triumph over pain and prejudice. Her brother's voice broke the silence. "I didn't believe you before. I thought you were lost. But now, I see. You're not just surviving, you're leading." Her mother nodded, tears threatening to fall. "We were wrong to doubt you. You've done more than we ever imagined." Her father stepped forward, his voice rough. "I'm proud of you, more than words can say." For the first time in years, the walls between them began to crumble. The bitterness, the misunderstandings, the pain, they all gave way to something far stronger. Respect. Understanding. A family reunited not by blood alone, but by the truth of who she had become. She smiled, a quiet peace settling over her. It wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. It was about healing, about acceptance, about moving forward together. "Thank you," she said simply, "for being here, for seeing me, not the mistakes, not the rumors, but the woman I am today." And in that moment, surrounded by the team she led and the family she loved, she felt a closure she hadn't known she needed. The journey had been long, the scars were deep, but here, now, she stood whole. Because no matter what they said before, no matter the whispers and the mockery, she had risen, not just as a survivor, but as a leader. A chief of trauma, a colonel, a daughter, finally, reunited with her family. The final challenge. The call came just as the sun dipped below the horizon. A catastrophic accident, multiple casualties, and chaos unfolding faster than anyone could imagine. As chief of trauma, she didn't hesitate. Every muscle, every thought, every breath was ready for this moment. Years of doubt, pain, and sacrifice had led her here. Her family had said she failed. They said she wasn't strong enough, smart enough, or disciplined enough to make it through. They'd refused to come to her graduation, mocking her absence as proof she was a disappointment. But here she was, clad in her military uniform, the weight of her rank heavy on her shoulders, and the promise of her role heavier still. She was chief of trauma, not by chance, but by relentless determination. The emergency room was a battlefield. Wounded soldiers, civilians caught in the wreckage, paramedics shouting updates. Nothing could shake her focus. Her team looked to her, eyes wide with exhaustion but burning with trust. This was her crew now. The ones who believed because she had led them through every impossible hour before. "Set up the triage here," she commanded, her voice steady. "We'll need 2 ORs ready in the next 10 minutes. Prioritize the head trauma and internal bleeding. Get me the trauma kits now." The room moved as one under her direction. The chaos was deafening, but her mind was clear, sharp. Every decision was surgical, deliberate. Each patient was a life, a story, a future she refused to let slip away. As she worked, the memories came flooding back. Her journey from being the girl who skipped graduation to the woman now commanding the respect of the finest surgeons and soldiers alike. The surgeon who once doubted her, the same one who had whispered, "She's chief of trauma," now looked at her with unshakable confidence. Her hands moved swiftly, stitching wounds, stabilizing fractures, ordering scans. The weight of every life in that room pressed on her, but she welcomed it. Pressure was the forge where she had been tempered. Then came the hardest moment. A young soldier, barely older than herself, was rushed in, critical, barely clinging to life. His eyes fluttered open and met hers. For a brief second, she saw the fear and hope mingling there. She squeezed his hand, whispering, "You're going to make it. Trust me." Behind her, the team worked flawlessly, but the tension was palpable. Lives balanced on the edge of a knife. Every second stretched longer than the last. In that moment, she thought of the funeral, her husband's funeral, where the very soldiers she now led had once mocked her grief. They had seen her as weak, broken, unworthy. But when they stood at attention, saluted and called her colonel, everything changed. Respect was earned in fire and blood, not given in comfort. "Colonel, we're ready," came the voice of her second-in-command. She nodded, steeling herself. "Let's save him." The surgeries were grueling. Hours passed as she navigated complications, guided her team, and made split-second decisions. Fatigue gnawed at her, but she pushed through. Failure was not an option. As dawn broke, the chaos began to subside. The injured were stabilized, the worst avoided. Her team gathered, exhaustion etched on every face, but pride shining just beneath. She looked around and saw something she hadn't expected. A deep, unspoken respect. Not just for her rank, but for the strength she carried, the battles she had fought, and the lives she had saved. Her journey had been anything but easy. Family doubted her. At times she doubted herself. She had skipped her own graduation, but she had never stopped moving forward. The surgeon's words echoed in her mind. She's chief of trauma. Not just a title, but a testament. And now, in the aftermath of the storm, she knew without a doubt, this was where she belonged, leading, fighting, saving lives. She turned to her team, voice steady, but filled with emotion. "We did this together. Every life saved today was because of you. Because of us. Remember this moment. Carry it forward." The salute she received was not just military formality. It was respect earned, hard won, and deeply felt. In that moment, she wasn't just a woman in uniform. She was a leader, a survivor, a warrior. and she was ready for whatever came next. Legacy of strength. The room was filled with applause, the kind that swells from the heart and carries with it a deep, unspoken respect. She stood tall, the sharp lines of her military uniform reflecting years of sacrifice and determination. The woman they once doubted, the girl who skipped her own graduation because they said she had failed, was now being honored as chief of trauma. It wasn't always this way. Her journey was carved through silence and shadows, threaded with moments when the world around her seemed to crumble. When her family turned away, whispering that she would never succeed, she held tight to a stubborn flame inside, a fire that refused to be extinguished by disappointment or derision. "You failed," they said. "You're not good enough." That was the chorus she heard as she watched her peers walk across the stage, diplomas in hand, while she remained absent. It was a wound that cut deep, but the surgeon, who later looked her in the eyes and said, "She's chief of trauma," gave her a different truth to hold on to. That moment was not just a promotion. It was a declaration, a rebirth. Leading a trauma unit under the harshest conditions demands more than skill. It demands courage, it demands heart. And through every emergency, every sleepless night, every life hanging by a thread, she proved not only to others but to herself that she was worthy of that title. But the real test came where she least expected it, at the funeral of her husband. They mocked her there, at the place where grief is supposed to be sacred. Whispers floated through the crowd, harsh and cruel. Some questioned her strength, others her loyalty. They saw only a woman, alone and broken. Until the soldiers arrived. One by one, they stepped forward, their uniforms crisp, their faces solemn. And then, a voice rang out, steady and clear, "Colonel, we're ready." In that moment, the weight of their salute was heavier than 1,000 words. It was a recognition of leadership, of resilience, of the indomitable spirit she carried within. The same soldiers she led, the same lives she had fought to save, acknowledged her as their commander, not just in rank, but in heart. She remembers standing there, the echoes of their salute washing over her, and feeling something shift inside. The ridicule faded. The doubts that once haunted her vanished. What remained was a profound truth. Her journey had shaped her into a woman who could lead, inspire, and endure. Looking back, it's clear that every struggle was a stepping stone. Every failure was a lesson. Every moment of pain was a forge that tempered her resolve. The girl who once felt alone now stood surrounded by those who believed in her family, who had come to see her strength and stand proudly by her side. Her mother's eyes glistened with tears, no longer filled with judgment but with admiration. Her siblings, once distant, now spoke her name with respect. The family that said she failed had witnessed her triumph, and they embraced it. But this is not just a story about personal victory, it's about the legacy she chooses to build. She knows that her path, marked by hardship and perseverance, is a beacon for those who come after her, for the young women and men who doubt their worth, who face barriers that seem insurmountable. Her journey is proof that strength can be born from struggle. She has made a promise to mentor the next generation of medical professionals, to guide them through the storms she once weathered alone, to teach them that failure is not the end, but a call to rise stronger. That leadership is not about the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. Her commitment is clear: to ensure that the legacy of strength and resilience continues, carried forward by those who dare to dream, who dare to fight, and who dare to lead. As she looks ahead, the future is no longer uncertain. It is a canvas waiting to be painted with new stories of hope and healing. And she stands ready, chief of trauma, colonel, mentor, and inspiration, ready to write the next chapter, not just for herself, but for all who will follow. Because true strength is never just about what you achieve, it's about what you inspire others to become. And that is the legacy she leaves behind. The journey continues. 25 years old. In full military uniform, standing tall with a steady gaze, she is no longer the girl who once faced doubt and dismissal. The journey that began with whispers of failure and the sting of being told she wasn't enough has now led her to a place few ever reach. The surgeon's words still echo in her mind. She's chief of trauma. Those words weren't just a title. They were a declaration that resilience, courage, and relentless determination can rewrite any story. Her family once said she failed. They said she wasn't cut out for this path. They watched her skip her own graduation, a moment meant to celebrate achievement, because she was too overwhelmed by the weight of their disappointment. But failure? No. That was never the truth. It was simply a chapter, a hard lesson in disguise. When her husband died, an unimaginable loss, those same voices turned crueler. At his funeral, they mocked her grief and questioned her strength. But then, something remarkable happened. The soldiers who stood by her side, those who had seen her fight battles both on and off the field, stepped forward. With steady hands and solemn respect, they saluted her and said, "Colonel, we're ready." That salute was more than protocol. It was a salute to her unwavering spirit, to the woman who had risen from ashes and refused to be broken. It was a moment that transformed mockery into honor, ridicule into respect. Today, as she stands before her trauma unit, her vision is clear. Compassion is at the heart of every decision. Medicine is not just about procedures and protocols. It's about people. Each patient carries a story, a family, a future. And it is her mission to ensure that every life touched by her team is met with empathy, understanding, and the relentless pursuit of healing. Resilience is the foundation. In this unit, setbacks are not endings. They are opportunities to learn, to grow, and to innovate. The scars of yesterday fuel the breakthroughs of tomorrow. She has seen firsthand how the human spirit can heal when given the chance, and she instills this belief in every member of her team. Innovation is the path forward. Medicine is always evolving, and so must they. From cutting-edge surgical techniques to groundbreaking trauma care protocols, she encourages her unit to challenge the status quo, to ask, "What if?" and then to find the answer. Because in trauma care, seconds can mean the difference between life and death, and innovation saves lives. Her journey is a powerful reminder. Failure is not the end. It is a stepping stone to greatness. The obstacles she faced were not walls, but stepping stones. Each challenge, each harsh word, each moment of doubt forged a stronger leader, a compassionate healer, and an unbreakable human being. To everyone watching, this story is for you. Whatever your struggles, your setbacks, your moments of despair, know that your journey is far from over. Embrace the challenges, learn from the pain, let it fuel your purpose, because greatness often hides behind the mask of failure. Look ahead with hope. Your future is not defined by where you stumble, but by how you rise. Stand tall, just like she did. And remember, the greatest victories often come after the darkest battles. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Your next inspiration is just a click away.